we are going to go over Core Idea 1.3, Scientific Measurement. And what are we talking about? Scientists use the metric system to make all scientific measurements. So the metric system is what we use in all other countries, except for pretty much the United States, unless we're using science. So we're using metric. A scientific measurement is made when an instrument is used to obtain a measurement. For example, a ruler or a stopwatch or a thermometer. And remember that when you take measurements, you must have numbers, which everyone seems to remember, but everyone seems to forget the units. So you have to remember to include the units. So for example, length. Length is typically measured with a metric ruler. So the basic unit is going to be centimeters or meters, because in science we use the metric system because that's what's used around the world. Temperature. Temperature may be measured with a thermometer. And the basic unit in science is degrees Celsius. That's what they measure temperature in Canada. So if you're in Canada and you hear that the weather is going to be 2 degrees Celsius, you should know that that's really cold. It's close to around 32 in the US. Right here, you'll see if you look across in Fahrenheit, this is what we use in the United States. But in science and around the world, we use the metric system, which is Celsius. Time. In science, time may be measured with a clock or a stopwatch, and the basic unit is what we use already, hours, minutes, and seconds. Volume is a measurement of the amount of space that an object occupies. So liquid volume, we can measure it by using one of these things, a graduated cylinder. So there's a graduated cylinder, you fill it up with liquid, you measure how far up it goes, and the basic unit is milliliters, ml. Regular volumes, like a cube, we could measure it by measuring the 3 dimensions and then multiplying them together. Length times width times height. So we would use the ruler to measure the length, the width, the height. And we would get, our basic unit would be centimeters cubed. An irregular shaped volume, we would put a certain amount of water in the graduated cylinder, like let's say 10 milliliters, and then we would drop the object in there and see how much it went up. We're going to do some practice with that, but you'll see. So the basic unit is milliliters, and it's important to know that 1 milliliter equals 1 centimeter cubed. Mass is another thing that we're going to measure. It's the amount of matter in an object, and the basic unit is grams. Next, we have to talk about rounding, because we're going to have to do a lot of rounding, and it's going to be very important on the final exam at the end of the year, because it's very important that you know how to round correctly. So we're going to talk about place value and rounding the decimals. Now, everyone knows that this is the ones place, right here. And this is the tens. So when you have 10, that's the number that you use right there. And this is 100. So this is 582. Now when we have a decimal place, everything after the decimal place is called tenths, and then hundredths, and then thousandths. So you have to know these different places in order to answer the question. So this is where you start from the beginning. You must know this. Hundredths, tens, ones, tens, hundredths, thousandths. See the THs at the end? That's how you know that these go after the decimal. So how to round? You're going to find the place value that you need to round and underline it. Then you're going to cross off all the numbers to the right. You're going to look at the number that comes directly after the number that you want to round. If it's 5 or above, you're going to give it a shove, which means it goes up. If it's 4 or below, you're going to let it go. So remember that you are rounding to the number that you underlined, and let's do some practice. So, guided practice, here we go. For this one, we're going to take this number and we're going to round it to the nearest hundredth. So I want you to find the digit on here that is at the hundredths place. Where is the hundredths place? And that's the number 8. So we underline the number 8. Next, we're going to look at the other numbers after it and cross them off. So now we know that it's an 8 that we're rounding to, and the number after it is a 2. That's smaller. It's less than 5. So what do? We leave it alone. We let it be. We make it 123.58. That's the answer for letter A. Let's try it again. Let's round this one to the nearest 1. So underline the nearest 1. Underline the 1. So this is tens, this is the ones. So we're going to underline the 4. Then we're going to cross off the numbers after. And then we're going to look at those numbers. Is this 5 or above? Yes. Okay, so what do? We raise the number. So the answer would be 35. This one goes up because this is above a 5. Let's try it again. Letter C, to the nearest tenth. So underline, find where the nearest tenth is at and underline it. So that is this 0. So we underline the nearest tenth. We cross off these right here. Forgot to do that on here. This one's above a 5. So we're going to bump this one up 1. So it's 79.1. Try letter E. To the nearest whole number. So we're rounding to the nearest whole number. So we're underlining the one we're rounding to. And we're going to take a look at this number right here. What is this? It's a 5 or above, so that means we have to raise this number. So if we raise 79 up 1, we're going to get 80. Let's try F. To the nearest hundredth. So find the hundredth spot and underline it. So we underline this 9. If we take a look at the number after, it's above 5, so we're going to raise this up. So 3.99, if we raise it up 1 spot to the hundredth, it's going to be 4.00. See how they're getting more difficult as we go? Letter G, to the nearest tenth. So you're going to find the tenth. That's it right there. So you're going to look at the number after. It's above a 5, so that means that we raise this one up. So it's 2.0. Notice that even though 2 is equal to 2.0, we still have to have that number in there for rounding it to the nearest tenth. You have to show that tenth place. So that's how you measure. You now know the basic units of measurement. You now know how to round. So we're going to do some practice. So remember, here are the important things you need to remember. Mass. These are what they tend to ask questions about. Mass is the amount of matter in an object. Volume is the amount of space that an object occupies. And your observations can be improved by using instruments to make measurements. Do not paraphrase these statements. Write them out fully.